Hello, M&A scientists. Welcome to the M&A Science podcast. This podcast is part of a mission to rethink how M&A is done. The old school settle-led approach is dead. Buyer-led M&A is all about strategy, alignment, and efficiency, putting value creation at the center of every deal. And let's be real, it's not just about closing the deal, it's about making it successful. It's why we uncover what truly works in M&A by learning directly from the best. If you're ready to challenge the status quo, ditch outdated methods, and learn how to minimize risks while maximizing value, you're in the right place. For episodes, resources, and tools to elevate your M&A game, visit mascience.com. Follow us on LinkedIn. I'm your host, Kison Patel, founder and CEO at Deal Room and chief scientist at M&A Science. Joining me today is Bob Chapman, chairman and CEO of Barry-Wehmiller, and Kyle Chapman, president of Barry-Wehmiller. Bob Chapman is the chairman and CEO of Barry-Wehmiller, a $3.6 billion global capital equipment and engineering solutions company, recognized as the Theraso CEO of the Year by SHRM and ranked as the number 3 CEO globally by Inc. Bob advocates for a people-centric leadership approach, which he describes as truly human leadership. His philosophy emphasizes the importance of caring for people as a key to business success. Kyle Chapman has served as president of Barry-Wehmiller Group since August 2020, leading the organization to its various platforms, including hybrid equity firm BW Forsyth Partners, which he co-founded. With over 22 years of experience in private equity and operations, Kyle focused on creating a vibrant organization where care for people, drive for performance coexist harmoniously. Today, we're going to discuss their journeys from traditional management to a people-centric philosophy and explore how culture and leadership drive success in M&A. Gentlemen, Bob, Kyle, thanks for taking the time to have a conversation, taking a break from running a global organization and doing a bunch of M&A deals.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity.
Can we start off with a little background? I think we need 2 parts. I almost feel like we need an individual background and a Barry-Wehmiller background.
I'll go first. I'm got a pretty traditional business background, got an accounting degree from Indiana, MBA from Michigan, went to Price Waterhouse, was in public accounting for a couple of years, and was invited by my father to join a pretty broken family business that he had invested in the 1950s, which was struggling. But I decided to take on the challenge, and so I began in 1969. I joined about an $18 million company that was old technology, but I decided to do that and bring my skills to that. And so that's how I began. And I think that's we've transformed the company from that original 18 million to this 3.6 billion, which we're going to talk about. But again, today it was a Wehmiller family company for almost 100 years, and it's been the Chapman family since 1963.
Yeah, my background, I went to the University of Virginia, studied finance, and went into private equity on the East Coast. Was there for a number of years, and then went into a private equity-owned business that we helped purchase. And it was interesting, right? So I was never working at Barry-Wehmiller. It wasn't an option. It wasn't discussed. There was no family in the business. And so I was on a great trajectory, worked with wonderful people, had a good career going. And then about 16 years ago, in 2008, 2009, Dad and one of his board members kind of would constantly go back and forth around the good and the bad of private equity, and said, hey, let's start our own version of an investment fund, but have a human-centered approach. And so I came back to start what was then called Forsyth Capital Investors, now called BW Forsyth Partners, and led that and grew it. And it grew much bigger than we expected because of our kind of operating approach, our human-centered approach, our long-term buy, build, and hold. And then about 5 years ago, the board, our dad asked me to come over and be a CFO. I'm not a trained CFO, so that was an interesting journey. I became a COVID CFO, So that thrust me into the front of the organization. And then the board and senior leadership team at the end of that 8-month interim CFO stint asked that I come over and run kind of the global organization. So it's been a heck of a journey, not one that you can prescribe for anyone, but it's been pretty great.
I appreciate the background. It's really fascinating too, to sort of have that build up in private equity and now back in the business. And I think it's just fascinating working as family, because I could imagine working for my dad, but then I would be honored to have one of my boys come work for me one day. So we'll dig into that. Could we do a little history on Barry-Wehmiller? I'm just curious about the business origination, and I know you've been heavily involved in the M&A story as well.
Yeah, so I gave you a touch. Again, the company was founded in 1885 by Mr. Barry and Mr. Wehmiller. Mr. Wehmiller was the inventor, and Mr. Barry was his brother-in-law, who was the financial partner. And Mr. Wehmiller developed a continuous motion pasteurizer that allowed breweries to ship pasteurized beer and ship it to farther distances. And and the company grew dramatically internationally in the early 1900s. And then he died in the teens, and his wife, Lily Rasher, took over until their son, Fred, could take over. But the company struggled when Mr. Wehmiller died and his wife took over, and then their son took over. The company never had the innovation that drove its early periods. So it existed like many family companies based on its history, but it struggled. It struggled with international competition. It struggled with leadership. And my dad was Arthur Anderson, accountant, was asked to come in and do the audit of Barry-Wehmiller in about 1950. The company had the banks wanted an audit, and Mr. Wehmiller said, "Would you join Barry-Wehmiller and become our treasurer and general manager?" So my dad stepped out of public accounting to help this struggling family company. Big risk, and then he had a chance to invest $30,000 in stock in the mid 50s. And then in 1963, a company approached my dad and said, "We'll lend the company the money if you want to buy out the Wehmillers." So basically a leverage buyout. So the factoring company lent company money against its receivables. The cash was used to buy out the Wehmillers at some price, and our family became the controlling interest. So we inherited an older company, but I think important to your audience, as I said, I studied when I was a young man because it's a St. Louis company. I knew some of the people. I studied Emerson Electric and how Chuck Knight built Emerson Electric through acquisitions. And I hired some of his some team members, and I really was intrigued by this balanced business model. So in 1960, so my dad died 6 years after I joined the company. I took the passion that I had gained for the company, bottle washers, pasteurizers, the brewing industry. And I spent from 75 to 83 trying to take its history and give it a future. And some significant financial challenges and mistakes I made. And in 1984, I looked at my finance team, barely financeable. I mean, we were on the edge financially. And I said, "I'm proud of our history, but our history does not give us a future." So I began, having studied Emerson Electric, I said, we need to acquire companies that have a better market position that gives us a better future. So I began doing acquisitions with no experience, purely to give the company a better future, from its history to its future. So 140 acquisitions later, we've transformed this company from a company focused on its historic markets of the brewing industry and returnable bottle washers and beer pasteurizers to a diverse global company that has seen a share price growth of over 10% a year, compounded for 25 years. So we've created a vibrant organization really through a combination of acquisitions and organic growth. So again, today, that $18 million company, when I stepped into it, is a vibrant company that is now $3.6 billion, and Kyle's vision is on its way to becoming a $5 billion global company that we hope is a symbol of what companies could be, which is good stewards of the people that we have the privilege of working with as team members, as investors, as clients.
So Kison, real quickly, where we are today, just to kind of going from that $20 million single product, single customer, single technology, our $3.5 billion is focused in two business models: highly engineered equipment, so our history, but serving the packaging market. So we make packaging machinery, we make equipment that makes corrugated box boards, we make equipment that makes toilet paper. You're welcome. We make equipment that fills cans, does all these things. Things you touch every day on a daily basis comes off of our equipment. The other business model, again, is professional services, kind of complex professional services. So we will help a pet food facility. We will help all the engineering around how to process pet food. We'll buy the equipment, we'll put the controls, we'll even help construct the facility. And so we have kind of business to business consulting as well. And if you think about the mix of our business, our $3.5 billion, about 1.2 comes from, a third of it comes from the equipment, a third of it comes from the parts and services related to that equipment, and a third of it comes from kind of this high-end professional services firm.
And you're privately held.
Yes, privately held.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but let me add, privately held, but we adopted something I think your audience will find interesting. When I was doing an acquisition in the 90s, our company, privately held company, was valued on the basis of book value. We would sell to our executives stock at 91% of book value, and we'd buy it back at 91% of book value. We were doing an acquisition, trying to buy a company and trying to use our stock, and we embraced what we called EVA, economic value added, to value our stock in the transaction with this company. So we gave him stock in Barry-Wehmiller valued at EVA, economic value added, which simulates market. And we valued his company on that basis. So that opened our mind to a way to value our privately held company that emulates public traded company. Because it might be a little confusing to your audience that I say our share price has gone up more than 10% a year, compounded for over 25 years, because we value our company with the methodology of economic value added. And it has allowed us to look at transactions on a very professional level. So as a privately held company, we have a simulated market value all the time. We're trading at a certain multiple. We can compare to public companies, but we don't have the issues of a publicly traded company. So that was kind of a unique thing we do as a privately held company. I would say to you, to your audience, we're kind of a privately held company that operates with the best of disciplines of a publicly traded company, and a value that constantly monitors that through this EVA methodology.
Is that based on like a third-party valuation or just an internal sort of algorithm you created?
It's not. It's based on Stern Stewart's EVA theory that came out in the late 1990s. And the way we validate it is our auditors opine on the inputs, but it's really a discounted cash flow on steroids, right? And so it's internally generated, achievable goals. And it's validated by third parties in terms of when we use our equity to help buy companies. So sellers take equity in Barry-Wehmiller, and sometimes we'll have an investment banker validated or a wealth manager validated, et cetera. But the whole process, we're consistent. We apply the same kind of methodology around it. Ernst & Young kind of validates the inputs, and then we have people buying and selling, which validate it every day.
To our knowledge, he said we're one of the, if not the only, one of the few companies in the world, according to Stern Stewart, who use this to its full potential. It's like a publicly traded value without the issues, the fluctuation of emotion, and it gives us the ability to use our privately held stock as currency in transactions, and they can have investment bankers opine to it and say, yep. So it's worked. We embraced this in 1997. It's a powerful tool for a privately held company to use our stock as currency in transaction, and it helps us align. We can look at every acquisition we look at in terms of the EVA impact, because it allows you to evaluate all your initiatives and determine the value it's going to have on your stock. So it's a powerful tool.
What does like the typical structure end up looking like on an acquisition? Because it sounds like you get a good amount of rollover equity, but in terms of what portion ends up being like cash versus seller financing or other tools you might be using?
Yeah, Kison, the funny thing is having done 140 acquisitions, you would think 2 would look alike, and none of them do, right? So the answer is, in some cases, we'll buy a business out 100% cash. In some cases, if it's a big transaction and we like to keep our leverage low so that we can operate in all types of environments, we'll ask the seller to take rollover equity into Barry-Wehmiller. In some cases, if there's a difference in valuation, we'll use seller paper or earnouts. Just to kind of help bridge the gap. And so you name it, we've done it. And we've probably done a couple of others that you can't even think of.
Fair enough. That's helpful. So I got to give a minute to connect some dots here. A couple people. Jeff Giles is the first person that introduced me to your company. And I met him when I was doing research when I first started Deal Room back in like 2012, 13. And he was kind enough to give me a bunch of feedback, but he was working for you at the time. He said, listen, Kison, if you do anything, you got to go to our company website and just like check out all this stuff. Like our CEO is so big about culture and this and that. And I remember going there. I went to the bow and I was like really fascinated. I was like, wow, it's just about the work environment, how it impacts the home for everybody, and why there's a big emphasis on the work environment. Just remember that from way back then. And then more recently, there's a gentleman, Jason Lippert, LSI Industries, that I had an opportunity to do a podcast with. And big emphasis, and his big role model was Bob Chapman. And, just the culture. He's like, if you get the opportunity, you got to go tell me. I'm going to name drop you and reach out to Bob. And it finally worked, because in the last 9 years I've been doing this podcast, I've pinged Bob a number of times. I won't put him on the spot too much, but I finally, which is another lesson I like to just share with everybody. Persistence is a key to all of this, any deal you're pursuing. But I did want to connect those dots because there's that big theme about culture that I really want to talk about, because it seems that you have developed a way to take culture and turn it into a strategic advantage.
Yeah, let me just comment before Kyle does. We did this because I had some revelations that changed my view of my responsibility as a leader. To not see people as functions for my success, but to see people as somebody's precious child who's been placed in my care, knowing the way I'd lead Barry-Wehmiller would impact their personal life. So those revelations occurred, okay? And we began to embrace this culture. I would say to you, the byproduct, so the reason we did it was through the lens through which I saw people change from what I was taught and I experienced. And what happens is that it becomes an incredible strategic advantage in addition. Not only are you caring for your people, but you attract unbelievable talent to your company, okay? I mean, unbelievable talent from major corporations around the world, because they want to work for a place that cares about them. And again, not only does it attract talent, but it attracts companies that want, if they're going to transition the ownership, they want to talk to us because they can't talk to anybody else who will talk about the stewardship of their people. So it becomes a talent advantage. It becomes an opportunity to bring other companies into our sphere of care, and it becomes a strategic advantage. So again, it's amplified our talent, it's amplified our opportunities, and it retains, because talent, I mean, you gotta have the greatest business model, but if you don't have the talent. So the company that today exists has got some exceptionally talented people from companies from around this country who now can bring the skills they had, but they can put it in a culture of caring. And it really creates a magnetic force that attracts talent, customers, opportunities, that is powerful. Not just money. It's not that we're going to go throw money. So again, the other thing I want to mention just really briefly is when I began doing acquisitions, I had no money and no experience. And so that was an advantage when I look back at it, because I couldn't afford to fail. If I failed, it was all over. So we began to, so the fundamentals we developed were very conservative, looking for value. So again, this culture that we've created becomes not only the right thing to do, but it creates some strategic advantages over other people.
When did you start this? Like, when did the culture focus start? I mean, is it before the first acquisition? Was
1997. No. Traditionally, we began doing acquisitions like everybody else. This really it began with the acquisition of 3 companies that we did in 1997, about a $100 million acquisition, big acquisition. That's when it began. And, it was a series of 3 revelations. One is again was in 1997. We acquired a company called Hasten in South Carolina. I flew down to be there, and I was standing in the lunchroom. It was March of 97. March is March Madness. Everybody in the lunchroom was breakfast, having a cup of coffee, was talking about college basketball and having fun. And I just happened to notice that when it became 8 and they walked to do their job, the fun went out of their bodies. And so my first revelation is, why can't business be fun? Why do we call it work? The second revelation was I was sitting in church, and my mentor was the rector of our church. And all of a sudden I looked at Cynthia and said, Cynthia, our rector, Ed, has only got us for 1 hour a week. We have people for 40 hours a week. We are 40 times more powerful to impact people's lives than our church. And the final one was the wedding, when I realized that the lens through which I saw people as functions, engineers, accountants, receptionists, financial team members. And the lens through which I saw people at this wedding was reversed. I said, these aren't functions. They're somebody's precious child who's been placed in our care. And so that revelation led us to totally transform the way we looked at our moving from management, which is the manipulation of people, to leadership, which is the stewardship of people we have the privilege to lead. So that's kind of how it happened. Started in 1997, ran through around 2001, which was the wedding.
Yeah, and just adding to that, Kison, I mean, if you think about our acquisition history up until the mid-2000s, we bought very struggling businesses on the verge of bankruptcy. They were bankrupt but didn't know it. I mean, really struggling businesses. And so there wasn't, back then, Dad was taught management. He got his MBA, right? He was taught the language of business and ran businesses with brute force because failure meant death. It was in these series of epiphanies in the late 90s, which was then articulated in 2000, and our kind of cultural statement at the time was called our guiding principles of leadership. That's when the culture took off. And we experienced from 2001 to 2008, phenomenal growth. I mean, just tons of work. We were doing acquisitions. Our culture was gaining momentum. And then 08, 09 comes. And you want to test a culture. You run it through the Great Recession. Right? I mean, you run it through everything was correlated, everything was crashing. And we managed that period of time like a family. How can we all have shared sacrifice versus very few having to take the brunt? Because our orders fell off, they went down 40% like that overnight. And the way we handled that situation, it was a fork in the road. We could have tossed everything we'd done for the last 10 years out of the window, then gone right back to what every one of our competitors did, which was laying off tons and tons of people, where we can embrace our culture, shared sacrifice, and live our culture in the toughest of times. And that's what we did. And then you want to talk about growth. Coming out of 09, our growth took off. Our culture was galvanized. People, during that period of time, that downtime, we worked on the business. We were doing lean continuous improvement events. We were doing all these things. So it was just culture is great when everything's going well, right? It's when you test it and we galvanize it. And then, 10 years ago, Dad wrote a book on it. So these series of epiphanies are in his book, Everybody Matters. And when you write a book about it, it's hard to not live up to it, right? Because it's written down and people are reading it.
I think somebody actually sent me an excerpt from the book. I think Jason might have.
Yeah.
But you sort of came through these realizations about culture and essentially got codified, so it became part of it. I'm curious about, and it sounds like it's tested, right? You went through the recession. I feel like there's a lot of stories to unpack around that, because that's got to be a real big,
a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, exactly. We can. I interview a lot of people, and you talk to anybody, and it's like where the fail point is in M&A, and it boils down to culture. That it's always integration related, and that if there's not a cultural alignment when these companies come together, then it sort of disrupt things. And hey, I got to imagine this world. Every company has their own unique culture, and then I'm curious to get a sense of how you think about it, because you've established this core culture in your company, but then you're continually acquiring other businesses that have their unique culture. How does that assimilate? What's the thinking and the strategy to make that actually work and come as one unified culture?
I'll explain it from my dad will have a much more articulate way. One of the things is we are super transparent. Like we aren't waiting for a deal to show up. We aren't waiting and saying, oh, we're going to do stuff after the deal gets done. We are very proprietary in nature. Most of our acquisitions have been done based on relationships courted over, 3, 4, 5 years, in some cases as long as 20, right? And so we're always intentional about what we hope to do with the business. And when we sit down, people are drawn to us because, if it's an owner, they're thinking, how is my legacy going to be preserved? Well, we are legacy preservers. We're legacy builders. Our goal, Dad's history used to be buying underperforming companies. Well, when you've got companies on the verge of bankruptcy, they love people coming in and saving them. So it kind of putting in culture and saying, hey, we're here to save you, et cetera, is great. We've kind of moved to, we buy companies that are underperforming their potential. These companies could be growing, they could have great EBITDA margins, but we see a bigger opportunity for them. And we talk to them about it. We talk to them about what it means to be under the Barry-Wehmiller umbrella. And when we're talking about building a better world through business, and we are attracting people seeking us out that aren't going to sell to private equity or a big strategic because they want to see the legacy preserved and know that their people are adopted into an organization, not acquired or whatever, but adopted into an organization. Cultural stuff kind of starts happening naturally, right? And because we're so intentional, because we're so transparent, because most of our transactions have been based on a relationship that's been built over time, the ground's fertile for cultural assimilation. We have programs, we teach people what it means to listen. We teach, financial literacy classes. We teach all this stuff so that we help develop people along the way. But the ground is super fertile in any acquisition. We wrote a book on it, right? People expect us to be cultural stewards of the businesses. And so anyway, that intentional transparency and discussion around what it means to be a part of Barry-Wehmiller and what our broader mission is, both attracts businesses to us and allows us to culturally assimilate a lot easier.
Yeah, what I'd add to what Kyle said is people say to me all the time, I can understand having a good culture in your core business, but how do you bring it to all these companies that you've adopted, acquired all over the world? How do you do that? And I say, one of the things we've learned in this 20-year journey is that everybody in the world, regardless whether you're in China, India, Serbia, Italy, Germany, you simply want to know that you matter, okay? That is a universal human truth. And I'll never forget, I was in Los Angeles where we were adopting a company, and I was talking to the team members and said, welcome to the family, you've got a good future with us. And a lady spoke up, and she looked like she might have been in her 40s. And she said, she got tears in her eyes. She said, I never thought I was going to get a chance to work for a company that cared about me. Okay. So I would say to you, whether the company is financially successful, whether it's struggling, the universal truth is people want to know they matter. Okay. And they hear about us, but they think, a lot of companies say good things, but don't live those values. Okay. So we're only as good as our reputation. So remember, what Kyle and I are sharing with you has been validated. Harvard wrote a case study about 8 years ago on our culture, and it's become one of their better selling cases with 70 universities in the world using it to teach leadership, how to care for the people you have the privilege to lead. So one other opportunity, we had an opportunity to acquire a company in France. It was a good debate with our board because of the challenges that they perceived of operating businesses with all the government intervention and workers' councils. But I eventually got them comfortable. I flew over to meet with the workers' council. Okay, in fact, the union, but they represent everybody but management. Sat down with about 8 people. I explained, welcome to the family. We're going to build a good world together. And I share with you what we believe in. And I shared our guiding principle of leadership, our overriding statement, we measure success by the way we touch the lives of people. And so again, normally workers' councils, unions are kind of in conflict with management. At the end of the discussion with this group of, I think, 8 people, a gentleman named Felipe looked at me and said, Mr. Chapman, could I say something? I said, sure. He said, Mr. Chapman, we've been waiting for you for 32 years, and they began crying. Why? Because even the government can't protect your soul. The government can't show that you matter. And when we walk in with our message in Serbia, we had a unique opportunity to acquire an exceptional company in Serbia, competing against all of our competitors who wanted to acquire it. And the owner picked us because of our culture. And we now have almost 500 people in this plant, and the culture is amazing. So this is a universal truth in every part of our country and every part of the world. People want to know they matter. Okay. And that is not simply, you can't ask people to care. You have to teach them how to care, which is what we do. So I would say to you, we didn't do this to attract companies. We didn't do this to attract people. We did it because it's a responsibility of leadership for those people in your care to send them home each night, knowing that who they are and what they do matters, because the way you lead your company impacts the health of your team members and impacts the way they go home and treat their family.
So a lot of the things you both described, I talk a lot about buyer-led M&A. And this is my observation that first time you do an M&A deal, it can be very seller-led. Maybe the bank process, and you go through and then you do another deal and the process evolves, and usually around deal 10, it shifts. It becomes very buyer-led. And you've described that you're proactively sourcing these deals. They're not just showing up to you with the book. You're actively building these relationships over long term that you got to know them. That's buyer-led, very proactive, very intentional. And then the other part is the culture piece, right? In terms of the integration, it sounds like it's so much driven around the culture. I was curious about the execution. Is there things that you do? Because the transparency is the other big thing you emphasize, Kyle, which I think is all, again, buyer-led. It's like there's no surprises. This is what's going to happen. When it comes to actually executing deals and making them successful, what does that look like in terms of, being proactive to sort of get the alignment on integration and planning and the leadership and everything to really make it successful? Because again, a seller-led process, you're dead focused on closing the deal. You get the deal closed and it's like, here's the keys, bye.
Right.
And it doesn't sound like you're doing that.
No, Kison, I wish it was something more dramatic or like some unveiling. It's literally just about sitting down with our intentions with the business, right? Sometimes we'll buy a business whose facility is in a place that doesn't make sense for us. And we'll say, listen, we cannot buy your business and keep this facility. It is up to you if you choose us. But if we have to leave this facility, we want to be intentional about it. We want to treat people well. We want to let them know well in advance and help them either make the transition with us to another facility or help them find their next role in life. But if somebody's like, oh, I can't tell them that, we're out. If we can't be transparent with owners, with what our intentions are. The other thing is we share information. We're a private company. We could be like, oh, you know what? We'll tell you when we get on the other side. We share our growth. We share our share price. We share our financials. We share our intentions. And yeah, maybe sometimes we overshare, but it's worked more often than it hasn't. And it really helps align expectations, et cetera. We also set expectations on what it means. Sometimes these businesses we bought maybe did or didn't have the best culture. Maybe they didn't share information. Maybe they didn't do cultural assessments. Maybe they didn't do things to recognize their people in a way. We let them know that's coming. Just like somebody would say, hey, I'm going to have KPIs that you're going to look at from a financial perspective, or we're going to do some commercial work together. The cultural initiatives are as important as anything else. And that's what I think we bring unique as a buyer, and why people are more and more attracted to us. I would just tell you right now, I wish we had unlimited capital, because the momentum that we are receiving right now is unbelievable because of the way we adopt and preserve legacies and grow and scale organizations.
Well, Kison, the other thing for your listeners to add to that, when I began in 1984 with my just common sense to start doing acquisitions, I looked for companies that had a better market than we were in. But eventually, what I look for, because in the 80s, I really struggled as a company, and I learned a lot when I struggled. And so in 1988, when we had a chance to kind of start again fresh after we spun off 2/3 of our company in the London Stock Exchange, and now we were financially stable, I said, what did I learn? What did I learn? And what I learned to do was fix struggling companies, which I had done. And so in our market, there were a lot of struggling companies. So I took what I had learned and I took it to other companies that had similar issues. And so that's Kyle talked about. We started with companies that were struggling. Why? Because I felt comfortable that I could bring value to struggling companies in the future, and it worked out extremely well. Because what I learned through my mistakes in the 80s gave me a skill that other people didn't look at these companies because they were struggling. I looked at them and saw value. So I would say to you, I'm not that smart, but I have good common sense. I'm creative and I have a positive attitude. So I was able to see value where other people didn't see value and buy at a competitive price because we did the deal. You know, they're not going to sell to us at less than that. But I saw value where other people didn't see it. So again, it was pretty much a passion to diversify our company, reduce our dependence on any one market, and so we built this, again, the business model design. So I want to just emphasize that, Kison. Our business model design is extremely intentional. It's based on a diversity of products, markets, and customers. So if something changes, we don't hurt our people. And I learned that from Emerson Electric. So we're very intentional within our competencies to have diverse markets, customers, and products, so that again things change. We've seen a lot of change in our country in my lifetime, and we are resilient to that, which has already been tested. And we will continue to make sure that we are thoughtfully diverse in fields that we believe create opportunities for us in the long term, recurring revenue, consulting revenue. So we're not dependent just on capital spending that tends to swing. We've got recurring revenue and consulting revenue. So the biggest thing anybody in your audience can do is make sure you have a vibrant business model design and you stay within your competency and you don't get, I did a presentation at Washington University a few years ago on acquisitions, and I read a study that 77% of all acquisitions fail to achieve the goals of the acquirer. Why? And I said, because of deal momentum. You get in these deals and you got to bid up and then you got to make it work. Okay, and usually cut costs and transition people. So I would say to you, we were kind of born out of we had to do acquisitions to have a future, but we had no money, so we had to acquire companies that other people don't want because they'll virtually finance it. And that gave us some beginning competencies. And then we had this big event that we spun off 2/3 of our company on the London Stock Exchange, which gave us a financial. Harvard wrote a case study on it. It gave us now a new financial foundation now to build a second company from, again, our history. So again, we began in 1988 again with a $20 million company that now is $3.6 billion and is immensely thoughtfully diverse. It's a unique business model that I think will serve all of our stakeholders and our customers well.
What's the biggest risk in M&A?
The biggest risk in M&A is overselling revenue synergies. I mean, honestly, that's how people talk.
I'm surprised you count them.
No, that's how you convince yourself to pay more. But honestly, truly is a misread on culture, right? If you don't have cultural alignment, things just fail. People operate in silos. They don't want to collaborate. And so having that cultural alignment is super, super important. When you're aligned culturally and you have standard expectations of what you want to do together, people lean in and work together and collaborate. But if you've got toxicity that exists in one side, it's very, very difficult to do well.
Okay, is it fair to say there's two parts? There's sort of like front end of the deal, pre-close, it is the price and the right expectations for the deal. Post-close, it's people. It's churn is probably your biggest risk.
Yeah, churn. I wouldn't say churn is. I would say just kind of.
Well, you're right. Motivation.
Misaligned culture.
Yeah.
which might create churn, but.
And I wanted to get into that because that's when you hear about things going wrong. It is you don't get the good communication, so you have all the FUD settle in. People are uneased about what's going to happen if they still have a job and all these things. And then just at the end of the day, people aren't happy. They're not very productive. And I wanted to click in of like, what does that look like? Like from day one, what does that look like when a company comes to your organization, day one?
Well, we share with them what we believe in. Okay. It starts with a very unique relationship. Okay. We're not, and let me go back to your statement about cultural alignment. We rarely buy a company with a good culture. So it's not that we have cultural alignment because we rarely have leaders who focus on culture. They focus on.
Do you do any culture? Sorry to interrupt, but do you do any like cultural diligence? Is that a big part of it?
Nope. We one of the biggest companies we acquired up in Wisconsin, $200 million company, had a horrible culture. They'd been through layoffs and changes and churn and market, and we went up and interviewed. We'd already struck the deal, and we went up and interviewed some of the top people, and we said everybody hates everybody. And it's been one of our most successful acquisitions because the minute you
I have to tear up my M&A playbook now.
You should, because when we stepped into this company, we said, we believe we have a future together. Let's go do good things. And it changed overnight. Okay. So we don't need cultural alignment. Okay. We need to make sure that we can be good stewards of this business. Okay. And then share our vision. So the first thing I do is sit down and meet with people and say, welcome to the family. Here's our vision together. And then we live it. And so again, and we can show them, again, people who like Kyle's talking to that are talking to us about wanting to bring their company to us, they can go look at some of these cultures. Okay. So we live in a country where 88% of all people feel they work for a company that does not care about them. So you're not going to find good cultures. You're going to find maybe a good business from a financial standpoint, and maybe you'll find a nice family company with a nice family, but it's not an intentional culture. It just happens to be a nice place to work. So we don't really do cultural due diligence. We make sure we can be good stewards of this business. And then when we step into it, like I did in France, I sit down and say to them, welcome to the family. You have a good future with us. Let's go do good things. And people virtually come to tears.
Okay, so let's say I'm a incoming leader from a newly acquired company. What do you want? I'll be VP of sales. That's a fun role. And what does that look like? Like day one, I get that maybe there's a town hall and you're sort of bringing this message, which gets to some level of excitement. But I know things. We do this and then things die off really quickly and it's business as usual. How are you?
No. There's nothing about business as usual.
Yeah, teach me. Like, how do you sort of really make the actual change?
First of all, we have a vision. We have a very specific vision of what we're going to do with this business that we share. So it's kind of like being in the locker room and developing your play pattern. So the deal closes and the team runs out in the field and executes the play pattern. Okay. It's not, oh my God, we bought it. What are we going to do now? Okay. It's again, we want to be good stewards of these companies that we have the privilege of adopting. I like the word adoption rather than acquire. Nobody wants to be acquired. They want to be adopted. So our goal is to have a play pattern that VP of sales, he knows he's now excited because he's now part of a company that he now has a future with. So it really, I mean, again, 140 acquisitions around the world, and you have this culture. How's that possible, Bob? Because people want to know they matter. They want to feel safe, and they want to feel they have a future. And that is what they feel in our company. And it doesn't take long for them to feel that and look around. I mean, I had a call. My first call this morning was with 53 new team members from around the world who joined our company to hear how they have experienced our culture. And the stories of the major companies they worked with are horrible. Most people, work for, in quotes, legendary companies, but they were not treated with respect. They were laid off, downsized. And so we have something that we've been blessed with is very unique, which we care about the people we have the privilege of leading, and we treat them with respect and dignity, and people respond immediately to that. We touch their soul. Okay. And they share gifts. So you're VP of sales, you're the happiest guy in the company because now your clients are going to see that you're part of a company that it's got a strong culture. I mean, when we have customers visit our plant, the first thing we do is have our team members welcome them because we're people. We're not machines. We're people. You know, minutely short story. I was interviewed by Washington University organizational development professors a few years ago. And after an hour and a half interview, they looked at me and said, "You're the first CEO we've ever talked to that never talked about your product." And I thought a minute and I said, "I've been talking about our product for the last hour and a half. It's our people. I won't leave this earth proud of the machinery we build. I'll leave this earth proud of the people who built that machinery." It caught him completely off guard. So we have been blessed with the vision that people are our purpose, okay? And giving them a good future means performing at or above industry norms, attracting good talent. So since Kyle has joined us, you know, the attraction of talent that he has brought in to now with our scale, the talent, the future of this company is unbelievable in terms of the talent we have right now, blended with this culture, blended with our robust business model. So I think it's something that we want to share because I think it could heal a lot of this issues we have in this country where people don't feel value, they feel used, laid off, downsized, right-sized, fired. The language of business is broken.
Kison, real quickly, I mean, everybody always thinks that when we do an acquisition, like the Barry-Wehmiller bus shows up and drops a bunch of people in and everything's solved, right? And so, you know, we only invest in things we fully understand. Like we have proven playbooks, commercial playbooks, people playbooks, financial playbooks, you know, all these various strategies. And because we're buyer-led, we've been very intentional about talking to people about that and due diligence and asking them questions. And they realize, oh, you face those problems. Yes, we have. We know how to tackle them. So if as VP of sales, you aren't excited by the time this deal is struck by, you know, researching Barry-Wehmiller, talking to your leaders, then we haven't done a great job. Most of the time, it's pretty transparent that we're coming in and they know that our intent is long-term, buy, build, and hold, and we are proven business scalers. And as somebody looking to develop personally and professionally, you're going to bring cultural programs and you're going to bring opportunity for me for growth. As Dad said, I'm the happiest guy alive.
Wow. That's
and remember, you described a family business, but we have 600 investors in our company, team members and outside investors and several high net worth families. And they look at this stock and they look at its performance and they look at what it stands for. And it's a highly attractive stock that's attracted some exceptional families that want to put their money in a company they believe in. So again, it has attracted capital, it's attracted talent, and it's attracted opportunities, and it's attracted our clients.
So I want to role play this out a little bit. You know, we're a young company, about 10 million ARR, 50 employees, but I'm ambitious to bring M&A to our organization for growth. And I'm exploring them. I'm looking at a couple deals now. Cultures come up in both of them. I have one where question mark engineering culture. The other company is a question mark on the entire culture. And now and that was one that I thought like, maybe I just want to stay away from that one because I think that's going to be a real tough one. But now you've got me thinking about it differently. Can you coach me on this? Like first time doing acquisition. How do I make this work? How do I not screw it up?
Well, come on, Dad. Your culture doesn't matter, so let them know.
Yeah, I'm the one deal I'm like afraid of because the one I'm like I can fix over time.
So remember, when I started doing deals, I couldn't have failed. If I failed in my first deal, it was all over. Okay, and so I was so financially fragile. So I think you have to look at this opportunity. Are you confident that you can bring value to this organization? That 2 + 2 = 5, because again, once you build that muscle memory of behavior. So if you're looking at a couple of opportunities right now and you'll always have cultural issues. I've never bought a company that had a good culture. Okay. I have a lot of companies that have a good culture today, but because we brought that to them. So what you got to do is, what is your message to these organizations, and how are you going to pay a fair value that does not burden the company because you overpaid and you have to turn around and you lose the confidence of your investors because you overpaid and you underdelivered. So many people think, oh, 2 + 2 is going to be 5. We're going to put these together and then we'll get this. I say, make sure you know exactly how, when you put them together, You need to be extremely clear on how you're going to create value. Now, again, that's the way I started, because if I failed, it was all over. And so I learned my skills with failure is not an option. And so I was incredibly intense to make sure that I was a good steward of these. So if you look at these opportunities, I remember we had Bill Smithberg, who was chairman of Quaker Oats, on our board, and he said to me one time, "Bob, how on earth do you find all these opportunities?" And I said, "Bill, we are looking every day for opportunities. Every day we are looking for opportunities for the right one. We're not chasing deals. We are targeting companies that we believe in the long term would fit." And as Kyle said, one company I pursued for 20 years. Okay. So I would say to you, in terms of the deals you're looking at, I think you got to make sure that you know exactly how you can be a good steward of that business, and what price you can pay that's not going to burden that company with debt that's going to turn around and cause it to fail. Because again, 77% of all deals fail.
Yes, sir. So Kison, my quick advice would be, well, and Dad's right. I mean, everybody says they've got a great culture, but there's some cultural cracks in every company we've bought. And the key is to understand where the root cause is, right? So we bought businesses where the leader was the cause of the bad culture. And the one that Dad was talking about, where we did a massive turnaround, it was that one. I've done another deal where the leader was like a wet blanket sitting on top of the organization. And once we got that, the organizational vibrancy popped. And so you got to understand the talent, where things lie, et cetera. Then, as Dad said, you also, what's your point of differentiation? Why you? Or why the company? What do they bring to you? And because if you're just capital, then you're winning because you're paying the highest price, and not because there's a point of differentiation. They fill a gap. They have talent or leaders that you have. They have a technology that you want, or that you have a technology you could deploy, et cetera. So you really have to have that kind of clear path to synergy. And then lastly, you have to have multiple ways to win, right? So everybody's got revenue growth and all this stuff, but you have to have some plan Bs and Cs that you understand. Listen, if something doesn't go right, if we lose a customer that we thought would stay or whatever, how am I going to make up for that through other avenues? And so, and then I would just be transparent with folks and meet with as many folks. A lot of times, if you find that a leader, I assume you're going to do as a smaller business, a lot of your acquisitions are really people, can be people dependent, right? There's a few people that are driving a lot of value. So making sure you understand where those, how contingent and how risky those are, and that you have points of communication with them prior to close, because if somebody's not letting you talk to them, that's potentially a cause of a bigger issue, right? Like either they're not happy or they're, so there's just some things to think about as you kind of develop this stuff. And then post-closing, be there, be present, be transparent, be human, right? Like all those simple things.
Okay. So
Yeah, John, the other thing I'll add, when I began doing acquisitions in 1985, there may have been private equity firms, but I wasn't aware of them. There were mainly diversified companies like Dover and Bemis who I was acquiring companies from, companies where acquisitions didn't work out. The environment I see today that you're up against, that Kyle's up against, that we're up against, is the emergence of capital going into private equity, and what they're willing to pay to place their money and what they're willing to do to make sure they get that return is a dramatically different environment than when I began this. Okay. And so it's again, I've seen some prices that are, I cannot even imagine what people have put at risk by some of these companies at the prices, because you're going to hurt people. If you overpay for a business and it doesn't work out, it's difficult to have a good culture. And because again, we want a fair return on our investment. We want to be good stewards. We want to feel good about it. So there's so much money that's gone into private equity now that is chasing deals and is ratcheting up the price. It's a really much higher challenge today than when I began in 1985.
I'm sensing it. So keep things, creating value, making sure you have a real clear, thought out approach on how you're going to create value. I think I like the point, Kyle, you made on understanding the points of differentiation, both your company and the target, and the people factor, understanding where the value lies in the people and their influence on the culture, because you might have that one bad leader and that's the area you want to focus on. And it sounds like kind of where you're at too is like different maturity. Like I can't come in trying to replicate the Barry-Wehmiller way of doing things just yet. I feel like that really took time to sort of establish that reputation around the culture where Kyle, you mentioned is people actually look forward to it. They know what's coming. I'm not in that position. I kind of got to maybe start communicating, hey, this is what our culture is like and so forth. But it sounds like some of that stuff actually comes over time.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, again, we have a showcase. We have case studies written about us. We have a showcase that we can let people tour our facilities without any chaperone. So, even when I started Forsyth, right, I had no credibility, right? We were just an offshoot of Barry-Wehmiller, but I pointed to Barry-Wehmiller. So I got to point to case studies. I said, we're bringing that tool set to the businesses we're investing in. So I had an upper hand in kind of getting started. But yeah, you're right. But just if you have to be consistent and you have to be transparent, and you'll develop that track record quickly.
This is great tips, gentlemen. Kyle, so I got to ask from your perspective, third generation family member business. I think historically, this is the third generation is one that screws everything up.
Yeah, about 12% success rate. Thanks for bringing that up, Kison.
Seems like it's going pretty good just talking to you. The fact that you can be on the same call with your dad is actually a good sign. It reminds me of, I was reading the book, The Dethroning the King of the Anheuser-Busch takeover, which takes place in St. Louis. And, then it was a pretty interesting, I had a good friend of mine actually was a CMO at the time. So it was got to see both sides of the story. But I'd love to hear just your journey and sort of how do you make it work? Like what's good? And maybe some advice for me, if I can bring one of my generations to the business.
Well, so a couple things real quickly. So the third generation versus second generation, there's a whole nother podcast around the growth of the business from the 70s up to 83, the almost death of the business from 83 to 87, the public offering, which again, there's a case study on that. And then the rebirth of Barry-Wehmiller in 1987. So I like to say we're still in the second generation of the rebirth. I hope that just helps my statistics a little bit better. So that's one thing. But I'm the youngest of 6 children. I have 3 older brothers and 2 older sisters. We have a wonderful family, and no one worked in the business. And so I always felt that the best gift you ever gave me was no entitlement. So I went out and saw new things. I saw new ways to structure deals. I saw new ways to go into a plastic film manufacturer versus a distribution business versus buying a property and casualty insurance company. So I saw all these things. And then I wanted to get into a business. So I went and joined one of the businesses, the private equity firms I bought, and I wanted to see what it felt like to be on the other side. I mean, I knew nothing. When I was in private equity, I was like, oh, do this, do that. And then I'd go back behind my Excel spreadsheet and, wait for the next board meeting to say things that didn't make sense. And so I wanted to have a little more substance to who I was. And so went into a business and felt that what it felt like to be owned by private equity and in a little bit of kind of more shorter term thing. So all that said, the opportunity came back to start Forsyth Partners, leveraging my private equity background with my dad's, and the board, and they thought it was interesting, but it was like be this cute little side project. Well, we built just under $1 billion business at Forsyth, and we started doing things. I talked to you about early days. I was pulling from Barry-Wehmiller and like grabbing things to take to our businesses. And by the time we started getting bigger, Barry-Wehmiller started looking at things we were doing at Forsyth and started pulling us over. And it was just this, it's just this wonderful culture of Barry-Wehmiller. Everybody kind of pushes everybody to get better.
Right.
And then naturally, I was asked by the senior leadership team and my dad and the board to come over. Now, would I say, hey, Kison, have your son go into private equity, give him a fund, see how it goes, and then he can help run the business. It's not a natural course. and it's not really replicable. But it allowed me, without a sense of entitlement, even when I came back to start Forsyth 16 years ago, I never thought I was going to work in the mothership. I thought I was just going to build off this thing. And I realized that things that we were doing collectively as an organization really worked with each other. And so it just happened naturally. And my dad and my relationship is phenomenal. You could probably tell we balance each other well. Stories and anecdotes versus data, that might be one element, but I don't have the entrepreneurial flair he does, so I have to make a lot more data-driven decisions. But the transition's been amazing. The company is amazing, and again, my path, I don't think I could say, hey, copy paste this, but I think that lack of entitlement, like, go do things, go learn, go see. Because you can become really insular if you work in a business for 30 years, having not seen other business models or how the world works. And I think that's given me an advantage to help this transition even better than it would have otherwise. I know that's a long answer.
No entitlement.
Yes.
And I have 3 kids. I'm feeling inspired to have 3 more.
I have 4, and I'm not inspired to have 2 more.
Kison, let me add, Kyle's background is spectacular with great business education. He worked for some great people at Bank of America for capital investors, and then he had a chance to work on one of their platform, and then he started his own business and build his own credibility. It was an unbelievable path. I had a totally different but equally unique. When I joined Barry-Wehmiller in 1969, when my dad said, "Would you consider working for Barry-Wehmiller?" Here I am, 21 years old, 22, doing well at Pricewaterhouse. And my dad said, "Would you like to join this company? I need somebody I could trust." Okay, so my title was somebody he could trust. And we didn't have a great relationship, but we thought we could do it together. The beauty is, I went into my own management development. I worked in manufacturing. I worked in license agreements. I worked in customer service. I worked in finance. And so I had a chance to kind of get behind how a clock works, not just looking at the hands, but understanding how it comes together to create time. So when I stepped up, when my dad passed away, and all of a sudden I understood so many parts of the business that really allowed me to see things other people couldn't see. So again, I would say to you, the key to my comment. I saw value where other people didn't see it, and my creativity allowed me to apply it. So it's, again, Harvard did the case study on our culture, which, again, as I said, is one of their better selling cases, but they didn't do one on our business model because it's very unique, kind of the uniqueness of the way I came up. And again, the reason we started Forsyth Capital, as I said, the world needs to evolve beyond private equity, which is about deal flow and flipping, to long-term value creators. And so Kyle has really embraced this. So again, the way I got here, I don't think is replicable. Okay. The unique journey that got here. Now, the way Kyle's taking it is he's captured the legacy, the good news, but he's brought his skill sets and today's world, and we're continuing to grow and organically and through intentional adoptions. And so again, we kind of got here in a unique way, but we're now kind of blending those two together to create a great future for the people who put their faith in us.
That's a really great context. And it sounds like you're very humbleized through that experience as well, of having those different roles, and likewise with not having entitlement.
Yeah.
I got to ask, what's the vision? Where are we going? Because now we got, multi-generational aspect to it. We've sort of accomplished quite a bit, but what's the next decade generation look like?
Well, yeah. I'll answer. Hey, Cal, let me go first because I think you're going to add it.
You get to go first. I can't wait to hear it.
Okay, so until Kyle joined the firm, I felt that when something happened to me, that the company should be sold to a thoughtful buyer because of our unique journey. And then when Kyle joined the firm, it gave me a whole new perspective because he embraced the legacy of his grandfather and his father to carry this forward, but he brought totally different skill sets. So I would say to you that the legacy that we're very proud of now, I believe will carry on because Kyle has embraced it. The organization embraces it. So again, in my opinion, what we are blessed with is this legacy. It's not about creating more wealth. It's about being a symbol in the world for the way business could be a force for good, to heal this poverty of dignity in the world where people don't feel value, they feel used. So it's, I always say you can retire from a job, but you cannot retire from a calling. We've been blessed with a message that could heal the brokenness, and business could be that force for good if we knew how to care for the people we have the privilege of leading. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great. Where our vision is, we are just getting started, right? So we're a $3.5 billion organization. You could characterize us historically as an industrial, equipment business with this little investment thing over here and this engineering consulting services over here. And what the transformation we're going through right now is Barry-Wehmiller Group is really a value-added operator and investor in business models we understand, with an unending pursuit of people and performance and harmony and a permanent capital mindset. So we are, and so when you talk about your organization in that way, and I told you the two business models we really understand, it opens the aperture of our growth. So now our business isn't, we're a packaging platform, a converting platform, a consulting platform of this. We have an industrial and packaging automation platform, our most mature, but we've got innovation and growth going over there. We have our professional services segment, which has high organic growth opportunities, unbelievable people running it. And there's a lot of other businesses with similar business models in that we can grow. We have an engineering consulting business, but we've also grown an insurance services business from mid-30s million to 500 million, right? And so we see an opportunity to grow organizations there. And we have this budding life sciences technology business where we help automate the assembly of medical devices, and we make single-use centrifuges that are helping cell and gene therapy, drugs go through clinical trials. And so in each of those have tremendous growth opportunities. So Dad's at $5 billion, that's selling it short. I think we could be $6-10 billion over time. And again, we are our biggest kind of governor, right? Because we're family held and we have capital that needs and stuff like that. So the vision is unbelievable. But my real vision is that people talk about Barry-Wehmiller and my dad's leadership style like they talked about GE and Jack Welch and Honeywell and Larry Bossidy and all these other greats, these wonderful people that turned businesses around and did incredible things. But I want us to be our unique approach to business with people and performance and harmony, not one in sacrifice of the other, to prove out that business can be the most powerful source for good. That's the mission we're on. That's the momentum we're gaining. We want to be a wonderful place for companies to preserve their legacy, for people to develop into their full potential, and for shareholders that have aligned expectations for us. If we can do those three things, again, we're just getting started. I feel like a $3.5 billion startup.
I'm really inspired. I want to start listening to this conversation and rethink how we approach our own culture and internally and externally.
So again, and to cap up, Kyle summarized it beautifully. The most important thing for us, every time we have the chance to adopt another company, it's like opening another church in another community, okay? The ripple effect is dramatic. By getting scale and global impact, we believe we can be a symbol for what business could be, and we need to not talk about it. We need to live it and share it and start a movement so business becomes a force for good, exactly as Kyle said, because we live these values and we live them around the world. It's a global impact, and it could heal this poverty of dignity we have in the world. So we're very much on a mission, but with the talent we have and the business model we have, we can be good stewards of all the people whose lives we touch.
I know we're getting close on time, but I got to ask, what's the craziest thing you've seen in M&A?
I mean, when we talk about a buyer-led strategy, that means you do a lot of things in order to get a seller to sell to you. Dad once had to go visit with a gentleman and his doll collection, right? So that's one of the things, the things you do to get those early deals done. That's when he had no credibility and no money. So he had to get people, to like him. Gosh, I wish I had a better answer. And the craziest thing I've seen, the craziest thing I see right now is multiples people are paying for businesses. It's crazy. It's crazy.
All right. Yeah, Kyle and I look at it all the time, but the crazy, I mean, obviously the things I did to do equity, as Kyle said, I had to go visit the guy's dolls he bought for his wife around the house. There was a doll in every single piece of furniture in their house I had to look at. And I didn't get the company. But so I would say to you that the prices I see people being forced to pay to get deals, because you got all this money that's got to be placed. And I'm astounded at the price that people come to and the damage that's going to do in terms of the people that have got to be restructured to make that number work. So I think I'm very concerned with the pricing levels and the impact it's going to make on the companies, the ramifications of you pay too much, it doesn't work out, and people get hurt.
It's hard to get returns now. That's for sure.
Yep.
This has been a great conversation, gentlemen. I appreciate you taking the time, helping me become a better M&A scientist.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Our goal is for you to help us make people aware of the need for business to be a source for good in the world. And I think your questions have been great, and we appreciate your interest. And we hope you help us share this message with the world.
Fellow M&A scientists, if you listened this far, I got to hear from you. I had so much fun doing this interview. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let me know what you think. Give me the good, give me the bad. Give me some ideas for other topics. Give me some criticism. I welcome that too. That's how I get better at this. Till next time, here's to the deal.